If you're looking for a great Chongyun guide, then look no further because you found it. In today's video, I'm going to go over the playstyles that Chongyun is really good in. We'll go over weapons, artifacts, and team comps for all of those playstyles. Alright, let's go ahead and get right into it. So Chongyun's first playstyle is a Melt Enabler comp. The 4-piece Noblesse Oblige is the best artifact set that you can run for this because it's going to give him an extra elemental burst damage increase as well as an attack increase for all of his team members. In general, 4-piece Noblesse Oblige is really good on Chongyun because his elemental burst is such a low cooldown and cost. With it only costing 40 energy and 12 seconds, Chongyun being your Noblesse Oblige character is a really good choice. Coupled with the fact that his elemental skill also generates a ton of particles. Also, if you didn't know, the 4-piece Noblesse Oblige will also increase the attack of the burst that triggered it. So in essence, the 4-piece Noblesse Oblige gives 20% elemental burst damage and 20% attack bonus on his elemental burst attacks. So a pretty solid damage set as well as support set. Now, as for main stats here, you can choose between energy recharge, cryo damage bonus, and crit, or attack, cryo damage bonus, and crit. Now, why would you choose energy recharge over attack when Chongyun's elemental burst is already super low cost? So the reason for this is because many of Chongyun's teams have incredibly fast rotations, and sometimes when you switch back into Chongyun, you don't have your skills available. Sometimes you find that your E skill is actually on cooldown, but your burst wasn't. However, you didn't have enough energy to cast it. So running an energy recharge on your Sans piece makes it so that your elemental burst is always available whenever you need it. At 40 cost for his elemental burst, the cooldown on this is actually only 12 seconds. And if you actually look at his elemental skill, it's 15 seconds. So his elemental burst actually has a lower cooldown than his E skill. When you actually start playing Chongyun, you're going to notice this a lot, that your cooldown on your burst comes back online a lot more often than your E skill. 3 seconds doesn't seem like a lot, but when you're in game, you really do notice it. This can of course be mitigated if your substats are very heavily focused on energy recharge. So if you want to go that route instead and farm artifact pieces with energy recharge and then run attack here, that is totally fine. You really want to shoot for 180 to 160 energy recharge. Now in terms of weapons, Chongyun has some pretty good choices, although his best choice is definitely the Sacrificial Sword. This weapon is really strong on him, especially at higher refinements where you have a greater chance to reset the cooldown of your skill. So although the actual damage numbers are going to be lower than other weapons like the Prototype Archaic, Serpent Spine, and the Sea Lord, the reset on your elemental skill makes up for that damage. This is also because if you cast your E skill again while it's active, the Rhyme Chaser Blade will activate instantly and provide you that cryo res that you get from his passive skill. In terms of 5-star weapons, Wolf's Gravestone is definitely the most recommended because even though it has slightly lower damage than the Serpent Spine, personally for Chongyun, the passive skill on the Wolf's Gravestone is really good because it provides everyone a attack percent boost. So when you consider team damage, Wolf's Gravestone is going to win. If you happen to have a Lithic Blade or Akomaru, those are also good options, but they do have a condition on them. The Lithic Blade needs your team comp to have another unit from Liwa, and for the Akomaru, you need to have units that have at least 80 cost burst in order to get more burst damage percent. So although good, Serpent Spine is going to be better for personal damage. Now you also have a couple of other options when it comes to artifact sets, but they're not going to be as good as the 4-piece Noblesse Oblige. You can definitely go with a 4-piece Emblem of Severed Fate if you have a pretty good set for it. And of course, 4-piece Emblem of Severed Fate is good for a lot of different characters, so this one is definitely recommended to be farmed. Next would be a 2-piece Gladiator's Finale, along with a 2-piece Blizzard Strayer. This one just boosts Chongyun's own personal damage. And then your final choice is going to be the 2-piece Blizzard with 2-piece Noblesse Oblige. So under the assumption that you're using the Sacrificial Greatsword for Chongyun, the 2-piece Blizzard and 2-piece Gladiator set is going to give you overall the most personal damage for Chongyun. 4-piece Noblesse comes really close after that in 3rd place, and then after that the 2-piece Blizzard and 2-piece Noblesse, and then in last place the 4-piece Emblem of Severed Fate. However, even though I am ordering these different artifact sets, the difference between them is very, very small. And so the overall winner here is going to be the 4-piece Noblesse Oblige because it also buffs your teammates. Now, when it comes to team composition here, Bennett is going to be the main damage dealer here. When you mount Bennett's elemental burst, he's able to output some pretty ridiculous numbers. If you happen to have your Bennett at C6, it becomes a little bit harder because you're no longer able to infuse Bennett's normal attacks with cryo, making it a little bit harder on the rotation to mount his moves. It's still doable, but you're going to need some help from other characters, and your rotation is going to be a little bit slower because you need to switch characters. But the core of the Mount Enabler team is Chongyun and Bennett, and these two characters allow each other to mount each other's moves. Although since Chongyun's skills are such high cooldown, you really do need other characters to fill in the gaps and to apply more cryo or pyro so that either Chongyun or Bennett or maybe even your flex pyro character to be able to mount as well. So my recommended team, if you want to go for just a pure mount team, is to have double cryo. Chongyun and Diona are really good. Diona is really good at generating energy, especially if you have a sacrificial bow. This makes it so that Chongyun is always readily available on its elemental burst. And then for the two pyro characters, I like to go Bennett and Yanfei because Yanfei and Bennett both have really high scaling on their elemental skills and can very easily mount their moves with the help of Chongyun and Diona. If you happen to have Diona at C6, she also provides a crap ton of elemental mastery, making those mounts even more juicy. For the two flex spots, you can really go whatever you're feeling like. For example, like an animal support or Zhongli for a shield and resistance shred, or you can even mix and match some elements like Beidou, Xingqiu, Fischl, Raiden. Those all work pretty great as flex spots. However, if you do decide to go with a Raiden, for example, and then for your last spot like a Xingqiu, at that point you're really not playing a mount enabler Chongyun anymore. You're more so playing a variation on the Raiden national team, which is still a very strong team. But, you know, since this is a Chongyun guide, we kind of want to make Chongyun the star of the show here. So although those are your choices, if you want your Chongyun to be the star of your team, then limiting it to a purely mount comp or using an animo support instead of mixing and matching your elements is really what's going to make your Chongyun stand out in particular. Another way that you can build Yanfei if you don't want to build her for damage is that if you happen to have her C4, you can make her a shield Yanfei and provide a little bit more survivability to the team. Although Diona's shield is already pretty good for that. So I like to make my Yanfei built for damage. So now let me show you some of the math calculations I did to show you that these weapons and builds are very solid for Chongyun. First off, we're gonna go ahead and take a look at the weapon comparisons, and these are weapon comparisons for an attack percent build. So you can see I plotted a Serpent Spine, a Sacrificial Greatsword, a Prototype Archaic, and a Sea Lord at R5. And very clearly, you can see that Serpent Spine is the absolute winner. Sacrificial Greatsword is very low damage output, but that's because I did not include the reset on his elemental skill. On this chart over here, right next to it, is what happens when we get two E-skills back to back. And you can see that it pretty much catches up to the Serpent Spine. That's what makes Sacrificial Greatsword so good. That extra elemental skill on top of those extra elemental particles, making our burst come online that much quicker. But of course, like I said, these are attack percent builds, and I definitely did recommend an energy recharge build too to help with that burst uptime. And so if we are under the assumption that Sacrificial Greatsword is Chongyun's best choice, let's take a look at how that compares between different artifact sets. So here I have plotted the 4-piece Emblem Severed Fate, 4-piece Noblesse Oblige, 2-piece Blizzard and 2-piece Gladiator, 2-piece Blizzard and 2-piece Noblesse. This here on the left is an energy recharge build on the Sands, and the one on the right is an attack percent build on the Sands. So first, just taking a look at the total damage output between an ER and attack percent build, you can actually see that it's not that big of a difference. For a 4-piece Noblesse Oblige, we're dealing about 42k versus 34k. This is also, I didn't mention this, but a level 80 Chongyun with level 8 talents. And so the total damage difference here is about 21%. But of course, with the energy recharge build, if you're able to cast that elemental burst on command and off of cooldown with that 12-second cooldown, your DPS is going to be much better with the energy recharge build. And so, although 2-piece Blizzard and 2-piece Gladiator gives us the most overall damage, again, that extra 20% attack that you give to your teammates is going to increase your team's damage output. So that's why 4-piece Noblesse Oblige is the most recommended. You would think that if we built our Chongyun for energy recharge, that the 4-piece Emblem of Severed Fate would be the best, but it actually turns out that it's the worst. Although not by that much, especially when compared to the 2-piece Blizzard and 2-piece Noblesse, but still 4-piece Emblem of Severed Fate is going to deal the least amount of damage, and also provides no team benefit. This, however, will give you the most energy recharge because of the 2-piece set bonus. Although, you really don't need that much energy recharge, especially when you have it from the weapon and the Sands piece. And so if your substats are good enough and your energy recharge is all accounted for, you can go ahead and run attack % Sands, and then your damage output is going to increase by about 20%, which is pretty good, but you do need to make sure that you have those energy recharge substats, along with all of the other substats that you need, like crit. So this is if you really want to optimize Chongyun. Otherwise, the ER build comes pretty close. Alright, and now let's talk about a freeze composition. When it comes to weapons, Chongyun's choices are exactly the same, and the benefits are exactly the same as the Melt Enabler comp. Sacrificial Greatsword is amazing because of the elemental skill reset. Serpent Spine is going to give you the most overall damage, and then your free-to-play options, Sea Lord and Prototype Archaic, if that's all that you have. Artifact sets are also exactly the same. Noblesse is going to be the best because it will provide that team damage bonus, but all of the other sets come pretty close and they are better for Chongyun's personal damage. And of course, since we'll be freezing, the 4-piece Blizzard Strayer set is a great option, giving us a bunch of crit rate against those frozen enemies and even more with Cryo Resonance. The idea behind the freeze comp is all centered around Chongyun's elemental skill, in which he will infuse the melee attacks of characters with cryo. This means characters like Rosaria and Kaya can take advantage of that cryo goblet that they use. So not only will their elemental skills get benefit from it, but now their normal attacks will as well. We use Xingqiu in this team comp in order to freeze all the characters, and then you can run either Shenhe if you manage to pick her up, or an animal support to shred that cryo. And then for Rosaria and Kaya, this is very important. In order for them to deal as much damage as possible, you want them to run a 4-piece Blizzard set and build them with as much crit damage as possible, because the 4-piece Blizzard set is going to give those guys an extra 55% crit rate. 20% just for them being affected by cryo, 20% if they're frozen, and then of course since you're running Chongyun and another cryo character, you get that extra 15% from Cryo Resonance. So for freeze comps, Chongyun's job here is to enable either Rosaria or Kaya, or any other character that you want to infuse with cryo, which technically you could use any character that you want, but Kaya and Rosaria are going to be the best because their elemental skill also benefits from cryo damage bonus. Now if you somehow manage to get yourself a C6 Shenhe, then pretty much any character can work here, but that's probably going to be a very small majority of people. So since the core team here is Chongyun, Hydro character like Xingqiu, and then another cryo character like Rosaria or Kaya, the final slot can be a flex between Shenhe if you picked her up, or the animal support character like Kazuha or Sucrose. If you want to use Shenhe in this team, you can either replace your Rosaria/Kaya or your animal support character. This is not a Shenhe guide, but if you do decide to replace your Kaya and Rosaria, then you should build your Shenhe more in a classic way with attack, cryo damage, and crit, or attack, and crit. But if you replace your animal support character, then build your Shenhe for full attack, so that she provides as much attack bonus to both cryo characters Chongyun and Rosaria/Kaya. But if your team looks like Chongyun, Xingqiu, Kazuha, and Shenhe, building your Shenhe for more of a on-field DPS will give your team a higher damage output. Because at this point, Shenhe is only buffing Chongyun's damage, so allowing your Shenhe to do a little bit more crit damage is going to be better for the team's overall damage output. Alright, so now the last team that we can build for Chongyun is a Shatter team. However, do note that even though Shatter is the name of this playstyle, the team's damage output does not mainly come from Shatter Chongyun, but more so from Xingqiu's Rain Swords while they're frozen. Weapons are exactly the same. Sacrificial Greatsword, #1, and then everything else follows it. What really changes here is the artifact set and the main stats you want to choose. 4-piece Noblesse Oblige is still a really good choice for the same reasons as the other builds, but 4-piece Blizzard also is a really good option here. Since we're going to be freezing these enemies, having a 4-piece set for the Blizzard Strayer gives us a ton of crit rate. With a Shatter team comp, Chongyun is kept on the field more often than the Freeze and Melt Enabler comps. So that's why the 4-piece Noblesse Oblige is not as valuable than the 4-piece Blizzard, because you won't be using your other characters on field as much, and thus don't really take advantage of the attack percent buff. You can of course use snapshotting so that your teammates can take advantage of the buff, but just running the 4-piece Blizzard set is overall just easier. Now in terms of main stats, since this is a Shatter build, you actually want to build your Chongyun for Elemental Mastery as much as possible. So running an Elemental Mastery for all 3 pieces is going to give your Chongyun the most Shatter damage. However, farming that is going to be pretty difficult. So instead, just going Elemental Mastery on 2 out of the 3 pieces, preferably on the Sands piece and on the Circlet piece, is going to be one of your best options. If you continue to run Cryo damage on the Goblet, this allows Chongyun's Elemental skill damage to still deal at least respectable damage. I forgot to mention this about the Noblesse Oblige, but since we're building Elemental Mastery on our main stats, our crit rate is going to be very, very low. So that means the lack of crit rate from the 4-piece Noblesse Oblige makes our Elemental skill damage laughably weak. At least with the Blizzard Strayer set, crit rate is taken care of, and we can really just focus on crit damage on our substats. Now you're probably wondering how much damage Shatter actually does depending on your Elemental Mastery. 2 Elemental Mastery main stats can net you around 400 Elemental Mastery, and if your Chongyun is at level 80, those Shatters will have a base damage of about 5,000. However, if you add some Superconduct from Fischl, or if you have some Resistance Shred from Zhongli, you can increase that Shatter damage. Thank you guys so much for watching, especially if you made it this far. Thank you so much. And if this video helped you out at all, then don't forget to hit that like button and maybe even consider subscribing to my channel. I also have a Discord and Twitch, so go ahead and check out the links down below. Until next time, I will see you guys later.